One of the biggest topics happening right here in the spring and summertime of the low country marketplace is insurance. Why is everybody talking about it? What do you need to know? And how can we help you save money? That's what we're talking about today. Okay, Chris, so we're talking today about insurance, specifically property insurance, and what's been happening in what the insurance industry is calling a hard market. The opposite of a soft market being tons of carriers, tons of opportunities, low premiums, that sort of thing. We're in the other direction. We've got carriers that are pulling out of marketplaces. We've got rising cost of insurance premiums. We've got insurance companies that are getting super specific about what properties they'll insure, how they'll insure it, and the ones that they won't. And so we want to talk a little bit today about how is that impacting the marketplace, how's that impacting sellers, how's that impacting buyers, etc. And so just a little bit of a background about what's happening, the stories that we're hearing, and we just sat down and talked to a bunch of local insurance agents to understand kind of how this has developed. And really, we've seen it kind of coming really over the last year. Is basically you've got a little bit of catch up of inflation, meaning they're finally starting to feel the effects of inflation that's kind of hit other areas of the economy earlier than insurance. You've got a ton of losses that have happened. I mean, heck, all you got to do is watch the news, and it doesn't have to just be local here in the low country. You watch the news, any place there's a natural disaster, there's insurance losses, it impacts the insurance company. It's a global topic. So it tends to impact our low country market as well. And so you've got lower capacity. You've got companies that are coming away. They don't want it. They don't want risk. And so all these things are leading into a situation where now when we have insurance renewals, this could be you if you own property. This could be if you just talk to somebody in the market area. Upon their renewal, it's sort of that sticker shock. Like, what are you telling me? Like this, my insurance premium doubled. In some cases, tripled. We've even heard what stories, sometimes it's gone up 6x in some condo complexes, et cetera, right? Yeah. So it's a big deal because it starts to impact the affordability of insurance for some people. But more importantly, because I really think usually there's not just one cost of ownership that's going to kill the American dream. Like, oh, now I'm not going to buy because of X, Y, and Z. It's really much more of how do you get ahead of this topic? And what do you need to be doing as a buyer when you're preparing to buy property, knowing it's a topic that's important? How do you get ahead of that? And as a seller or just a property owner even, what should you be doing to kind of gear up for the best pathway moving forward, whether you're just continuing to own your property and you want to get the best renewal, or you're thinking about selling, you know this is going to be a big topic right now in that process, and how do you get ahead of it? So let's just talk about that, kind of peel that apart. Let's talk about the owner-seller side. What are kind of the moving parts that you're seeing, and your sort of best advice on that process?
Well, Chip, thanks. If you own a property and are keeping it, or you own a property and you're thinking about selling it, in both scenarios, this is very important. If you have a flood insurance policy, a federal flood insurance policy, super important, do not let it lapse. And I'll tell you why in just a second. But if you let it lapse, it's too late. There's no going back and trying to reinstate it at the current rate. Super important if you are going to sell a policy or sell a property and you have a current deck page on your flood policy, you have not let it lapse. It's assumable to your buyer at your current rate. And your flood insurance is not going to increase by more than, I believe, 15% a year. Okay, and this could be significant because a current policy right now. Let's take a policy that I'm aware of. It's about $750 a year for the current flooding policy. However, if it lapses and you have to reapply for that same policy, it's in excess of $5,000 a year.
So huge increase.
There's a huge increase, and it's all if you let it lapse. So think about it. If you are selling a property and you have a flood policy, that could be part of your marketing. A buyer can come in and just assume that policy and not have to go get one underwritten. So keeping that from lapsing and having a declaration page handy that you can provide to the buyer.
So the deck page is just that's that policy you get from the flood insurance company that declares what your coverage is, that address, and that sort of thing.
Yes.
And what you're saying is, like, mechanically, we've seen this in terms of how we lean in when we're listing property. We're not just looking for the seller disclosure and the cost of ownership. We're looking for some specific documentation like a deck page. Send us your flood deck page. We're going to load that up so that a buyer or buyer agent can grab it. Yes. And maybe walk over to their buyer's would-be insurance agency and say, hey, this is the property I'm thinking about buying. Just want to confirm I can extend or assume this flood policy, and that this is what the premium is going to be.
There's no question. And not just flood insurance, but insurance companies, they're paying special attention also to the plumbing in a house. They're paying special attention now to the age of a roof, more so in this hard insurance market than they did just a few years ago. I mean, we're seeing more situations where insurance companies are saying, you know what, we don't want to. You got polybutylene plumbing, we don't want to underwrite that policy. Or you've got a roof that's over 20 years old, get the roof replaced, or we don't want to underwrite the policy. And so it's really important. And not even if we talked about if you're not even going to sell, but you just own a house and you're going to own it for the next 20 years. This is important too. People that don't have insurance claims, okay, but they have maybe an old roof, or they have poly, or they have some other situation, or they don't have hurricane shutters or something like that. All of a sudden, come renewal, they can get a letter from their insurance company saying, we're not going to renew you this year.
Right.
And that is a shocker. I mean, people are like, well, I haven't had a claim. I paid my bills on time. I've done everything right. They're like, we're not going to do it.
Right. And so some of that could come in the form of some of these carriers that have been in place. In order for a carrier to withdraw from a marketplace, what does that look like? Upon renewal, there is no renewal.
Right.
They're basically saying we're out, right? So as they collectively and start individually pulling out, all of a sudden you don't get an extension for renewal on that. You go to company B and they say, well, do you have polybutylene plumbing? Is your roof over 20 years old? Do you have old electric? What age is your house? So one of the things that we're also recommending to owners and or sellers is shop the insurance and do it well ahead of your renewal so you can get a sense of you're not just waiting until the day before. It's like, oh my gosh, there's that sticker shock, but you've had the opportunity to shop this before that policy expires.
And talk with your insurance agent. So important. Call them up. You're paying a lot of money for insurance. Call your insurance agent. Have them meet with you. Ask them, tell them all about what you got, what your house looks like, and have them give you some guidance on your policy, on what you might need to be thinking about, what you might be overlooking at the moment. They might even have some premium reduction options that you weren't even aware of. So have that conversation early.
Yeah, for sure. And some of that, and we've seen some of that before over time, is do you shop the deductible? There's some variability on deductible. You got to be careful on that. But if you're trying to adjust your premium, that's one way to do it. Sort of the double whammy, too, is that, by the way, and we've seen this and we talked about this over the last several years, is the cost of construction has gone up. So a lot of companies, as they're being careful about the condition of the property that they're willing to insure, they also want to make sure that it's appropriately insured. So they may go into property that's been underwritten for 5 years and say, hey, we need you to do a new valuation. And guess what? Not only is the hard insurance market causing premiums to rise, but we also need your valuation to go up. And now it's this double whammy effect. And that's just going to segue back to the buyer side of the business too. So it used to be in a soft insurance market, you'd go through your buying process. Maybe you're getting a loan, maybe you're paying cash, etc. It's like, oh, I got to get insurance. You pick up the phone and call this, say, great, you're bound, and we close the next day. That's not what you want to do right now. You want to partner with an insurance agency early, a local insurance agency early and often and broadly, so that as you're starting to get an idea of what insurance is going to cost, you can actually specifically narrow that down. So if you're looking at 123 Main Street, thinking about making an offer, you can call up your insurance partner and say, what's the cost on that? And then they should be able to give you some pretty good ballpark numbers. You need to know that when you're considering what your debt to income ratio might be. And by the way, the lender needs to know that too, because if they're keying in sort of how you qualify for a mortgage, or does this make sense for you to get a mortgage on this property, they're going to be running that data too. Yeah. And the other phone call to make if you're thinking about buying a villa is get on the phone with the regime manager, find out what's happening with insurance in that regime villa complex, and find out when the renewal is, and are they expecting a sizable increase on that renewal? because that could have an impact on you further down the road. And the last thing on the villa regime policies is, generally speaking, if you're buying a villa, you need to buy an HO6 policy. This policy covers the interior of the property. When you're in a villa complex, the regime, that entity that manages the common elements, they're insuring the outside of the property, but not the inside of the property. And because we're in this hard insurance market, those lines are getting much more defined, and they're not going to come in and cover a claim on the inside if you have a water leak that goes down to the unit below you, etc. So an HO6 policy is really important to start shopping that one out too.
Yes.
So, just a lot happening in insurance. We're staying right on top of it, but we're encouraging owners, sellers, buyers, get way ahead of this. And of course, we've always got the list of the insurance agencies that are local. We've got great relationships with them. Those guys and gals are the true sources of information. We're just trying to bring this to light and encouraging you to dig in, get ahead of it, and make sure you've got a good strategic plan for handling insurance as a seller or a buyer.